There are many things about mental health issues that people don't understand. I hear people every day talking about things that they don't even know what they're talking about. Mental health has become something of jokes, yet feared out of confusion. Resolved. Mental health funding for facilities should be our priority in the state's budget because there are many components to mental health and research needs to continue because the number of mental health problems are growing every day. Also, it affects more than just the person diagnosed. First off, there are many components to mental health issues. The biggest is the negative connotation that comes with the words mental health. David Sedaris puts this into an everyday mindset perfectly in his book, Me Talk Pretty One Day, when he said, "My therapy sessions were scheduled every Thursday at 2:30. With the exception of my mother, I discussed them with no one. The word therapy suggested a profound failure on my part. Mental patients had therapy. Normal people did not." 30% of Americans 18 years or older suffer from mental health issues, stated by the New York Times. That leaves 70% of Americans in the dark about mental illness. That is 70% of people who don't understand mental health. And us as humans have a tendency of criticizing things we do not understand. People diagnosed with Down syndrome are the greatest example of how the unknown can deeply affect people. 93% of Down syndrome patients don't want to have kids, from the Women's Health Weekly. They are afraid their kids will be born with it, bullied and criticized, something they have dealt with their whole life, and something they would never wish upon another human being. Another reason we need to raise the state's budget for mental health issues is that research needs to continue to understand the 200 and growing mental illnesses. Researchers have recently found that video games are leading to new addictions like gambling, also from the New York Times. With technology advancing in leaps and bounds, it's creating new problems with little known about them. The Washington Post published an article talking about how researchers have just discovered the way the brain is triggered in schizophrenia. Though they knew what happens because of schizophrenia, they never knew how it was caused and how the brain reacted. Many experiments have been put on hold because there are not enough funding. The US budgets $3.8 trillion on healthcare each year, but only 113,000, or billion, is used for mental health, from the Psychology Today. Why do other forms of healthcare receive more? Just as many, if not more, are affected by mental health problems. The state needs more funding so that research can continue to help people. Finally, I want to point out that mental health affects more than just the person diagnosed. There are roughly 30 million people in the US, and over 60 million are diagnosed each year. Everyone in the 60 million people could have children or a significant other. They have parents and people who love them. With more funding, we could create places for people to go and get treatment. Psychology Today wrote about one facility by saying the goal is to restore a sense of possibility. To say I have experience in this topic is an understatement. 3/5 of my family suffer from a mental illness. 2 of the 3 from several. I've been raised differently than some. My family has to be careful when we go to the movies, so we don't pick movies that trigger my sister's epilepsy. We also could never watch fireworks or buy toys with flashing lights. My other sister has depression, and it affects her sleep and eating, often causing disorders where she doesn't do much of either. The worst is my dad. Sometimes he has nightmares so horrible he can't and won't sleep. During these times, he lives in constant fear, not of his safety, but ours, his family. As a young child, he would go away to hospitals, and I would never understand why my dad was always so sad. Sometimes he would visit, and I'd see him smile for the first time in what felt like forever. I'd ask him why he couldn't come home with us, and he'd explain that that is where he needed to be, and he'd be home before I knew it. Mental illnesses often affect more than just the person diagnosed.
Mental illness refers to a wide range of mental health conditions, disorders that affect your mood, thinking, and behavior. Examples of mental illness include depression, anxiety disorders, schizophrenia, eating disorders, and addictive behavior. And my opponent may say that they need to be funded through the state, but that is simply not true. I believe that mental health already has plenty, even too much funding. First of all, violent crimes, which are a leading cause of why people say that we need to raise our mental health funding, are only sometimes caused by one with a mental illness. Secondly, we can educate in a free and peaceful way. And lastly, there are other things that we need to worry about that impact all, even the world. First of all, violent crimes are only sometimes caused with those with mental illness, and can most likely be caused by everyone and anyone with the right equipment. Even though people with a mental illness have a total amount of homicides of 1,000 a year, the total homicides altogether in 1 year is 16,121 in the US alone. I'll give an example of Aaron Alexis, who killed 12 and injured 4 on a murder spree in Manhattan. It almost seems like this type of person who would do something so wrong would have some type of mental illness, right? Wrong. He was fully sane when brought to a court of law and simply just wanted to because of the fact that he didn't enjoy his life and hated the world. The thing is, not even the majority of homicides are caused by those with mental illness, because 34% of homicides are caused by intoxication, 5% by cocaine. Secondly, we already spend way too much on mental health, almost to the point of absurdity. We, at any time, have access to 36 credible online sources that can educate on mental illness. It would be extremely simple to include them in our mental health class, whether it be diagnosing the symptoms or identification. Mental health first aid, a credible online source, has a 1-hour class that can teach you anything and everything that you need to know on mental health. So if we have all of these free sources that say everything that we need, free for that matter, why do we need to raise the funding? Lastly, we need to focus on more important issues that have been plaguing our country longer than mental illness. 23 states increased mental health spending in 2015 and 36 in 2013, which hasn't had an effect on violence, rather just been money wasted on things where we could be spending on our technology to better this world. How much money do we spend on our mental health? Well, it's roughly the same amount as our education go to all of our children. Not only that, in 2009 we spent more on our mental health than childhood obesity, something that in the United States we have been plaguing us for such a long manner of time. In which case, our main problems in current years are being underfunded compared to mental illness.
My opponent brought up the topic of mental crimes. Though not all mental crimes, like he stated, are caused by people with mental illnesses, the ones that are often people that are not getting the help they need, or ones that are not being monitored on their pills and have often stopped taking them, or some that can't even afford what they need. He also brought up that there are educations online, but computers do not equal human affection. When you need help, people can be there for you. Childhood obesity is often caused by depression and eating your feelings away. So mental illness could be another way to cause that to end. Not saying that we can pull money out of thin air. And as much as the government would like to think they are not magicians. I say that we can take money from other forms of health care and give a little back to mental illness. It doesn't have to be trillions of dollars, but even a few thousand can help.
My opponent brought up healthcare and how essentially she thinks that we should pull money from that and put it into mental illness. Whereas I feel that is unfair because of people like veterans and basically children that are having physical illnesses and physical disabilities that essentially cripple them for life, whereas I suppose mental illness does that as well. My bad, I'm sorry. Well, I am not sure. Yep, that's all I got. I concede. I concede and I don't care.
Alright, Holly, you're closing.
Mental health funding for facilities should be a priority in the state's budget because there are many sides to mental health and research needs to continue to help others. It also affects more than just one person. John Field once said, mental illnesses are illnesses, just like diabetes, asthma, or cancer. So why do we treat them any differently?
Just want to concede at this point. One option. Or do I have to keep going?
Yeah, you're closing. One last argument.
We already spent plenty, even too much, on mental illness. The first reason being violent crimes. Then I talked about how we spend too much. Lastly, there are more important things that we need to fix. Life isn't a horror movie where everyone is some sort of psycho or blonde that trips over literally everything. Everything. Trips on the ground. We have more important things to worry about. Seriously, at this point,